Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
we're losing $1 million a month.
Employees protest cuts at Chicago's largest clinic for LGBTQ and HIV-positive patients.
A speaker has not been elected.
A speaker standoff in Washington. Our Spotlight Politics team weighs in.
Major layoffs in the tech industry point to an increase in the unemployment rate. The jobs outlook for 2023.
Opioid overdose deaths in Cook County last year are expected to set a grim new record.
If you're interested in joining Dry January, we have some tips and drink ideas to stick with it.
A small Chicago museum gets a very big grant from the city.
When it comes to the coaches, I feel like they're also another part of your motivation.
And a local youth boxing club teaches skills in and out of the ring. But first, some of today's top stories. Chicago receives $144 million in federal funding to restore bridges at the Illinois International Port District on the southeast side. Vice President Kamala Harris was in Chicago for today's announcement.
So just look at the 95th Street Bridge behind me. For many years, this bridge and 3 more nearby have served a critical role for communities in Chicago and Northwest Indiana. For thousands of truck drivers, this is a part of their daily route. And dozens of times a day, these bridges are raised so that ships can travel from Lake Michigan all the way to the Gulf of Mexico.
The House of Representatives still hasn't elected a speaker as the voting stretches to a second day. California Republican Kevin McCarthy has lost 6 separate votes in his bid for the position. This means the House cannot fully function or proceed with other legislative responsibilities. The House adjourned today and will be reconvening this evening, and we'll have more analysis of this later in Spotlight Politics.
Cook County homeowners have an extra month now to pay their first installment of property taxes this year. The new deadline for that tax bill is now April 3rd. The Cook County Treasurer's Office says the first installment of bills will be mailed out in late February or early March, but bills are available right now on their website for payment or viewing.
Coming up in the program, we look at the jobs outlook for 2023.
But first, what an employee strike could mean for patient care, so please stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Employees at Howard Brown Health are in day 2 of a strike over layoffs they say will create headaches for patients. But executives say it's necessary cost cutting. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda.
Yeah, Brandis, next year, Howard Brown Health will mark 50 years of serving the health needs of LGBTQ and HIV-positive communities. And as a federally qualified health center, it gets government money to support its mission, including providing care to those who are or underinsured. But it will do so going forward minus about 16% of its workforce. 64 from about 720 employees just got laid off. Another 15 accepted buyouts, and vacant positions won't be filled. Howard Brown CEO says it is needed to address a $12 million shortfall.
You know, we have to turn this around. We're losing $1 million a month. $1 million a month. So that is not a sustainable way to support a health system. And if we cannot turn this around, it puts in jeopardy the care of tens of thousands of patients, but also the security of the workforce needed to deliver affirming care.
Munar says Howard Brown had relied some on COVID relief money, but that money is all used. He says the bulk of the shortfall stems from expensive changes to a federal program that requires pharmaceutical companies to sell federally qualified health centers drugs at a discount. Also, he says Howard Brown started losing money when a popular AIDS drug went generic. Howard Brown provides drugs at no cost to those without insurance. Munar says the organization did its best to prevent patient-facing cuts.
We've frozen spending, discretionary spending on things like meals, travel, conferences. We've stopped advertising, and we're also looking at our line items for computer equipment as well as software licenses, really trying to make sure we take every opportunity to safeguard patient care.
He also says executives took pay cuts collectively totaling $100,000. According to the last available 990 tax form, Munar's Howard Brown's highest paid employee made nearly $330,000 for the fiscal year that ended June 2021. Striking employees say Munar is greedy. They say the financial situation isn't really that dire.
They are in pretty good financial shape and have significant assets and investments, and they are, many of which are highly liquid. So I believe there's definitely an element of union retaliation given specifically the timing.
Retaliation because some employees just unionized this summer and are in the midst of negotiating a first contract. Speaking of timing, the head of the union says it is a tragedy the layoffs came right after the holidays. She also says already patients have a hard time getting appointments, and this will make that worse. Among those laid off are bilingual health educators like Isabel Ruiz, who says she helps patients navigate language barriers.
And providers really rely on us to do our services to make them feel more welcome, more secure, more safe, just comfortable, like overall, make them feel safe during the visit.
There is not a day that any Howard Brown clinic does not need staff that is Spanish speaking. Every day, every hour, there's a Spanish speaking staff that needs to help a Latino patient.
Many of the layoffs targeted those who work in behavioral health and social services. CEO Munar says he agrees with employees. Needs in those areas for the LGBTQ community are great. He says Howard Brown had about 35 programs with small teams, but he says that model is not financially sustainable. Now, one laid-off employee says the change, however, will literally kill people. Mira Flores was a consultant for a program that helps sexual assault and domestic abuse survivors navigate court dates, getting orders of protection and fleeing their abusers. Flores says now there is only one employee for that program left. She says survivors often don't feel safe going to mainstream programs, which are mostly geared towards cisgender women. Flores says after one of the worst situations of their lives, survivors need affirming care like that provided at Howard Brown.
If someone's trying to flee an abuse situation and say they're a queer couple, maybe they're a polyamorous couple, just something that's not what society sees as normal, they won't have somewhere to go to feel safe, and essentially what could happen is dangerous. You know, their lives could be their lives are at risk. They were already at risk, and now without the support, they're even more at risk.
Literally thousands of people?
Thousands. We're the only queer program in the entire city of Chicago that caters to queer community sexual assault and domestic abuse survivors.
Flores says she can likely find another job, but she doesn't want to. As a queer Latina, she says she believes in her work at Howard Brown and says the health center, with its 11 clinics across Chicago, should have staff made from within its community. She's unsure what will happen as some of the clients she had been working with face court dates next week.
And Amanda, what's next for Howard Brown and those employees?
So the Nurses Association has filed a grievance with the National Labor Relations Board, essentially arguing that Howard Brown did not argue in good faith. And the hope is that the NLRB will restore these lost jobs. Meanwhile, Howard Brown executives say that they have been able to maintain all of the clinics functioning even as this strike is ongoing. And Munar says that despite these layoffs, Howard Brown is committed to providing health care for all of its patients and its clients.
Tough situation for a lot of folks, it sounds like. Amanda, thank you.
Thank you.
And up next, what the coming year might bring for job seekers. Stay with us. What should the city be doing to better support Black Chicagoans who are victims and survivors of hate crimes?
Classic city of Chicago, we work in silos, so the left hand doesn't know what the right hand doing, and the constituents get left out in between.
Power is the voice. The power is the numbers. The power are the people. The ability to sway elections is the power.
January is typically a month that sees a lot of layoffs, but what can we expect in 2023? The Federal Reserve released its unemployment prediction, and there are some ominous signs. The tech industry is already seeing sweeping layoffs, but will other industries follow suit? And here to break it all down for us are Tom Gimbel, founder and CEO of LaSalle Network, a staffing, recruiting, and culture firm in Chicago, and Jack Lavin, president and CEO of the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce. Good to see you both. Welcome back to Chicago tonight. So I'll start with that first question, Tom Gimbel. The tech industry has been ravaged over the last few months. Do you see other industries following suit?
I really don't, Paris. We see big tech, right? Companies that thought they were the smartest in the room. They hired up hugely in the pandemic, thinking it would go on forever, that people would be eating, living, working in their living room for forever. And that just hasn't panned out. And on the small tech side, we've seen interest rates go up, which means that venture capital firms can't borrow at zero and spawn as many different companies as they want. So those two areas are getting hit. But across the overall economy, I don't see it happening.
So specific to that industry, Jack Lavin, as we mentioned, January is known as a month of layoffs. What's the forecast both in Chicago and across the country?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say on the tech industry, on average, tech person gets laid off, takes them less than 3 months to get a job, 80%. So there's still a huge demand for tech workers, especially in Chicago. Our Chicago Tech Effect study said this is the fastest growing part of our economy. So we're still very bullish on tech, and it's not just tech companies. There's tech and non-tech. United Airlines, for example, has 1,500 tech workers. So we're still very bullish on tech. I think tech is going to be a considerable part of our growing economy in Chicago. Absolutely. We are one of the tech hubs in the world here in Chicago because of our education. Overall, I'm positive about the job outlook for the future. Maybe unemployment goes up a little bit, but that may just relax the market a little bit. Maybe labor costs don't go up as much. And it actually will help small businesses because when the unemployment rate goes up a little bit, small businesses have a better opportunity to hire people and at not at lower wages, but at reasonable wages.
Well, all right, let's get to some of those unemployment predictions because, as we mentioned, the Fed is saying they expect it to go up from 3.7% to perhaps 4.6% by the end of the year. Tom Gimbel, what does that mean for the average worker, the average business?
I think the average worker and the average business are going to be fine. I really do. I think we're going to be a little bit below the 4.6 number. That seems a little bit high, but you're right. Following the holiday peak, you usually see seasonal layoffs, so that does happen. But what we're not seeing across the board is companies having problems. So we work throughout the country, but our hub is in Chicago, and we have more job orders in more sectors than we've ever had in the history of our company. Companies are continuing to hire, just not at the volume overall, but more companies are actually adding staff because what Jack said is absolutely true, is that when big companies lay off talent, it gives an opportunity for small and medium-sized companies to get people that they normally couldn't.
And you had people in the quote-unquote great resignation going from one job, one industry to another. Jack Lavin, what about small businesses? They were socked in the pandemic, maybe bailed out by some of that federal relief money. What's the situation for them now?
Yeah, they're coming out of the pandemic and they're still dealing with supply chain shortages, labor issues, inflation, property taxes, skyrocketing property taxes. You had a piece on that a little bit earlier. Small businesses are getting hit hard. We need to make sure that the burden doesn't fall on them. Because they've shown over the 2 years during the pandemic they can be nimble, innovative, flexible.
They're talking about property taxes and income taxes.
Yeah, but they find ways to lower their costs and find ways to be more efficient, and they did that during the pandemic. Now we're coming out of the pandemic, and we need to make sure we don't put the burden on small business owners, like property taxes, additional burdens. I think there's a call in the city council to raise the minimum wage to $25. We just had it over 15 and it's going up by CPI. We have to make sure we don't burden our small businesses so they can grow. And there's lots of resources available to them now. The state Governor Pritzker and the Department of Commerce just got $350 million for a program called Advantage Illinois from the feds for loan guarantees, participation loans, venture capital. All these things can help small businesses. And right now, at a time when the economy maybe is slowing down a little bit, that's when people sometimes leave their job and go start a new company. And these resources are there to help those companies. And
Tom Gimbel, given the environment of the past couple of years, workers had some leverage here to demand better pay, to work from home. Is the pendulum shifting here if unemployment goes up where the workers no longer have that kind of leverage and companies say, you know what, we want you to be in the office 5 days a week and your salary demands may not be able to be met.
You're absolutely right, Paris. The pendulum is swinging. And so what we're going to have right now is moving to what I'm calling the permanent hybrid. And it used to be that we'd let employees, not we, proverbial, we society, let employees pick on what days they wanted to come in and do things like that. My company has been one of the leaders in this, is saying, you're coming in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, everybody. And our data shows us that over 80% of companies are going to have a mandatory hybrid, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office. And I'm not so sure that a year from now, it won't be Monday through Thursday for a lot of companies out there.
And maybe one day it goes back to Monday through Friday. Jack Lavin, I mean, being head of the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce, the Loop's economy, downtown's economy has been hit really hard by this work from home stuff. Can this perhaps help bring some of those small businesses in the Loop back?
Well, I think that, as Tom said, I think the number of days in the offices will grow. It will never be back at 5, but that will help small businesses downtown in the Loop. I think we're also, the city is looking at reimagining LaSalle Street and doing different things. We've seen different cycles, and downtown adjusts to those cycles and comes up with new business ideas. That's part of the Chicago business community. We're innovative, we're resilient. Small businesses are the same way, and they'll adapt to the market and how they grow and how they'll deal with it. You know, the top line went up, but their costs went up, and now they've got to deal with managing that, whether they're going to pay their workers more, pay more for supplies, but then how much can they pass that on to the consumer? They can't pass all of it on to the consumer. So they're going to have to be nimble and adapt to those changes and find ways to continue to grow and create jobs. 44% of our jobs are from small businesses here in Illinois.
Huge percentage. Tom Gimbel, you both seem pretty positive about the outlook, although a lot of economists warning about recession. How do you have employees prepare for recession? What do you tell them to prepare for possible layoffs? How do they get ready for that?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is you've got to play the game. You've got to be in it. You've got to be working hard. And too often we see employees that want to put their head in the sand and act like nothing's going on. Be alert and be doing your work. And so often we've gotten to this point that says companies aren't loyal. Companies historically have hesitated to do layoffs until we've gotten into this economy of the tech sector and the tech world over the past 15 years or 20 years. But I mean, pensions were created by companies, right, to help employees. They don't want to let people go. So my advice is, if you have an option to go into your office, go into your office. You don't want to be out of sight is out of mind. Right. And the second thing is, make sure that you're taking every single project you can get your hands on in the office and showing your employer that you're capable of working, because if they're going to let people go, they're going to let their worst workers go, if they have to, and they're going to...
the ones they don't see.
And the ones they don't see.
Good advice, Tom Gimbel, Jack Lavin, thanks so much for being here.
Sure.
Good to be with you.
And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, Cook County is expecting to set a grim new record. The Cook County Medical Examiner's Office says it expects the toll from opioid overdoses to exceed 2,000 deaths in 2022, once all autopsies for the year have been completed. That is more than double the number of homicides in the county and will eclipse the previous county record of 1,936 opioid overdose deaths in 2021. Joining us now to help us understand what's going on are Dr. Will Neese-Jasmin, Medical Director of Behavioral Health at the Chicago Department of Public Health, and Erica Ernst, Clinical Director at Renaissance Social Services and President of the Chicago Recovery Alliance. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Dr. Jasmin, let's start with you, please. Why do you think we're seeing this record level of opioid overdose deaths?
Yeah, I think with the increasing number of people dying from opioid-related overdose deaths, we've also, since we've been tracking it, have also seen a corresponding increase in the number of people who have fentanyl in their system when they die from opioid-related overdoses. And as you know, fentanyl is a very powerful opioid. Fentanyl and its related cousins, they can easily cause someone to overdose using a small amount.
Erica Ernst, why do you think we're seeing this increase?
The overdose epidemic, as I try to refer to it, is largely fentanyl, absolutely, and we're seeing a lot of more adulterants, including xylazine and its relatives, and yeah, so many adulterants in the drug supply.
A lot of adulterants that are worsening the problem, it sounds like. Dr. Jasmin, what makes fentanyl so dangerous and seemingly so ubiquitous?
Yeah, fentanyl is a drug, when it's easily manufactured, is very cheap to make. And because it's so powerful, you only need a small amount for its effects to be felt. And so it can be made in a lab, so you don't have to wait for a plant to grow and harvest the plant. And then it can be added to a whole host of different substances.
It's cheap, it's easy, it's mixed in and not necessarily identified, for example.
We're seeing it in many illicit substances, both anecdotally and in testing. We're seeing it in cocaine.
In cocaine as well as other opiates, or opioids, I should say.
What's being sold is heroin, yeah.
Erica, are we, still seeing the effects of the epidemic caused by, the overprescription of opioid painkillers?
That's not what I'm seeing with most illicit substance users. Most of the folks I talk to have never had a pill mill prescription or excessive opioid prescriptions. They're not folks who had Oxy or the like. They started on illicit heroin and continued with that.
What are some of your concerns, Erica? Because you've mentioned a couple of things. You've mentioned xylazine and other adulterants that we're finding being mixed in, and it's folks who are accessing this, just on the street. When you add all that together, what are you concerned about?
I'm concerned that they don't know what they're getting, and they never know what they're getting by bag to bag, and that we're seeing Seroquel, we're seeing substances that have no business being in what is being sold as an opioid. And these can cause mimicking effects, but they don't get reversed. Benzodiazepines too, they don't reverse with naloxone or Narcan.
And that sounds like that would be concerning if it's something that's not reversible in the case
Absolutely.
of NOD. Dr. Jasmine, is the impact of the pandemic, is that still a factor in terms of the anxiety and the isolation that a lot of people have experienced and were not able to access services for their drug use?
Yeah, so during the onset of the pandemic, those who were in recovery for a while or a long period of time, they may have lost some of the supports that kept them in recovery. And so they may have turned to drug use to cope with some of these feelings of anxiety like you mentioned before. And so now, as a health department, we always try to talk about the services that are available now, trying to decrease the barriers to care.
Of opioid deaths, we know that we've got some stats that came from the Medical Examiner's Office of Cook County. 78% are male, 56% African American, 28% white, and 15% Latino. Erica, why do you think we're seeing such racial disparities in overdose deaths?
A couple of things. That corresponds to the unhoused population. Men, BIPOC men tend to be the majority, which points back to racism and poverty. In addition, our African American men tended to be folks who were snorting traditionally, and they're in turn being impacted by the fentanyl. Snorting is less risky than injecting. You can titrate a little better, but with the adulterants we're seeing, it doesn't help much.
Has the same impact. More numbers. The age group most impacted by opioid overdose deaths are people, mostly men between 50 and 59 years old, accounting for, more than a quarter of all overdose deaths. Dr. Jasmine, any potential explanation for that?
So we have people who have been using heroin and other opioids for decades now, and we're seeing increased deaths because of the changing formulation of the drug supply. So what we as a health department try to do is try to make resources like this program called MAR Now, which stands for Medication Assisted Recovery Now. By calling the Illinois helpline, someone can get connected to care and treatment the same day. And so that phone number is 833-234-6343.
We'll be sure to include that number on our website as well. Naloxone, which we've mentioned, sold under the brand name Narcan, can reverse an OD if it's administered in time. Is that widely accessible for anyone who might benefit from it?
Yeah, so Narcan, that medication that reverses an opioid-related overdose, it is widely available. Just a few weeks ago, we were able to, with our partnership with the Chicago Public Library, make it available at every single branch in the city. In addition to the public library, we also have many partners that do outreach work, like Chicago Recovery Alliance, that has been distributing Narcan for many years now. And then we also are working with faith-based groups to make it available to their congregants.
Erica, we've got about 20 seconds left. What more can be done to bring these numbers down?
I think having naloxone and Narcan widely talked about and widely available. I love that it's in the libraries. Our living room project has the first naloxone Narcan vending machine in Austin, where it's really needed, and spreading the word and increasing education about drugs and drug supply.
Okay, that's where we'll have to leave it. Erica Ernst and Dr. Wilnese Jasmine, thanks to you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, a small gallery gets a big windfall. Stay with us.
There's much more ahead on the program, including why some people are skipping alcohol this month. But first, the city of Chicago is awarding a $5 million community development grant to a small Chicago museum. It's part of the city's Chicago Recovery Plan, which uses federal and local funds to support organizations and neighborhoods hurt by the pandemic. Producer Mark Vitale visited Intuit at their home in Westtown to get a sense of what this windfall means to them.
Intuit, the Center for Intuitive and Outsider Art, has been on Milwaukee Avenue near Chicago and Ogden since 1999. They showcase artwork by self-taught artists who didn't follow a traditional path to art making. Their newest exhibition presents drawings by Tariq Eccles, a resident at Little City in Palatine, a community of children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Intuit's $5 million grant stands to be a game changer for the 32-year-old nonprofit.
This is exactly transformative. We're a small institution, and this is going to allow us to take what I consider a Chicago gem and transform it into a real cultural jewel of the city. I think a lot of people don't realize that Intuit is here. We're one of the few museums in the world that focus specifically on this genre of art made by people outside the mainstream art world. And one of the reasons that Intuit is here in Chicago is because in Chicago, that art was embraced early on, before it became popular across the country. So Chicagoans interested in the edgy and different and quirky were really thinking about this art.
The city was looking for projects that were ready to go from groups that were able to provide a 25% match. And candidates didn't have to be nonprofits or cultural organizations. The museum says it will expand to the second floor of the building, which is currently used for storage. These renderings from their proposal depict new spaces and teaching areas. They also plan to enlarge the permanent exhibit on Henry Darger, the celebrated visionary artist from Chicago. And they'll have a new look facing the street.
One of the challenges here is that our facade is not particularly welcoming. It's not conducive to making this an inviting place. So we'll be opening up that facade, making it more like what it probably was originally, glass storefront on the first floor, making it very welcoming with an accessible ramp.
All of which ties into the larger goal of the grant, developing the community by helping an anchor in the community.
Here we are, a small museum in the Westtown neighborhood, and this is our opportunity to really take this great building that was never intended to be an art museum and transform it into a 21st century museum for the city of Chicago and beyond. We're one of the first places to really showcase this artwork, and we're going to have an even better space in which to do that showcasing.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
The other big grant winner is not a cultural organization. The Pullman Hotel Group also received a $5 million community development grant to build a new hotel on the far south side. And there's more from our interview at Intuit on our website. While you're there, check out our list of 23 recommended Chicago arts and culture events for 2023. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, still to come on Chicago Tonight. What staying alcohol-free during dry January could do for your mental and physical health. Kevin McCarthy's battle in Congress for the House speakership drags on and on in our Spotlight Politics.
When it comes to the coaches, I feel like they're also another part of your motivation.
And we take you inside a boxing club in Little Village, teaching kids skills in and out of the ring. But first, some more of today's top stories. Elected officials from the metropolitan area are announcing a new partnership in an effort to spur more economic development.
That really leads us to focus on the racial and ethnic wealth gaps that exist throughout our region, that hold so many back, hold so many from fully participating in our economy, and really harm the well-being of all of us as a region.
The Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership is a collaboration between the city and 7 counties in northeastern Illinois. The initiative has a 3-year initial pilot. Leaders say the program is aimed at strengthening the global competitiveness of the region by taking advantage of diverse talent and top-ranked industries. Chicago Bears quarterback Justin Fields will miss the team's season finale this Sunday due to a hip strain. Head coach Matt Eberflus says Fields did not get medical clearance from staff after complaining of pain early this week. The Bears can get the first overall draft pick if they lose against the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday and if the Houston Texans beat the Indianapolis Colts. Eberflus also talked about his team's reaction to the Buffalo Bills' Damar Hamlin going into cardiac arrest after a hit on Monday. He said the injury resonates with fellow players who know they take serious risks by playing a violent game each week. Nominations for the city's newly announced Poet Laureate program are now open. Officials say the Chicago Poet Laureate will serve as an ambassador for the city's literary and creative communities. They'll also commission new poems and create a public program series, including some for youth and students. The role comes with a 2-year term and a $50,000 grant. You can submit nominations through January 18th. The Poet Laureate will be appointed this spring. Paris, back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. With the new year comes new resolutions, and one of those gaining popularity is to quit drinking alcohol for the month of January, known as Dry January. And joining us to talk about the possible benefits behind the trend are Cristina Torres, owner and founder of Benedicción Dry Bar, and Dr. Elizabeth Poorman, assistant professor of medicine at the University of Illinois, Chicago. We welcome both of you here to Chicago tonight. Happy Dry January. Dr. Poorman, for those who don't know, explain what is behind Dry January.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having us. I love the opportunity to talk about this. So Dry January is a movement that's gaining a lot of traction, becoming more and more popular, where people just take a 30-day break from alcohol, and that could be a break that they may decide to make permanent. It may be a break where they can reassess their relationship with alcohol and how it makes them feel. Or it can just be a break where they get more information about, what their relationship with alcohol is right now.
And Dr. Poorman, is there a correlation here with COVID and perhaps the rise in overall alcohol use over the last couple of years?
Yeah, 100%. There's been, actually even before COVID, since around the year 2000, we have seen massive increases in heavy drinking and alcohol use disorder every year, and particularly for women. With COVID, with kind of the normalization of drinking during the day, drinking at home, and then also the increasing potency of alcohol that's being sold, we have, more and more admissions to the hospital for alcohol withdrawal, and we had actually a 25% increase in alcohol-related deaths just between 20 and 21. So I think, that's the severe end of the spectrum, but it's telling in terms of the total amount that everybody in this country is drinking. And I think a lot of people are getting to the point where they're wondering, what role do they actually want alcohol to play in their lives?
It looks like those overall trends going in troubling directions. Cristina Torres, you run a dry bar called Benedicción in Humboldt Park. So tell us about the kinds of drinks that you offer there.
Yeah, so Benedicción is located in Humboldt Park. Right now, we are running as the bottle shop in the front of the shop and working on getting the bar actually up and running. So we offer non-alcoholic beers, wines, spirits, canned cocktails, basically anything that you can get as an alcoholic version. We offer it as a non-alcoholic version. we offer our shop as a space for people who still want to have a fun drink and be social without any of the alcohol aspect involved.
Sounds like a great business model, Christina. Do you see an uptick here in folks looking for spaces like this who are sober or, as they say, sober curious?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've been busy since we opened. A lot of people are always super grateful that we're here and are just so curious about like everything that we offer. I think, like Dr. Portman had said, that during COVID, I think so many people were just drinking and drinking, and then after a couple of months, they realized they didn't feel very good, and so just like cut back on the alcohol. And I think from there, it kind of just sparked this curiosity as far as like what are the other options. So definitely very busy.
All right, so a lot of folks trying this dry month, 30 days here in January, but can 1 month sober really make a difference, Dr. Portman?
Yeah, and I just want to give the caveat that alcohol withdrawal can be very dangerous and, in fact, quite deadly. So if you're drinking heavily every day, and especially if you find that you have some withdrawal symptoms before you have your first drink of the day, this is something that you want to do in conjunction with your physician to help manage that. But if you're not drinking yeah, absolutely. And if you're not drinking every day, I think we have this very all or nothing mentality in this country. You're either drinking or you're not drinking, or you're going to get sober, or you're not going to get sober. But there's definitely degrees of this. And I personally think that Dry January is a great time for people to, kind of try this out. And as I said, get more information for themselves about what is their relationship with alcohol, how much are they drinking, how does it make them feel to not drink. And even after 30 days, you will probably see improvements in your sleep, in your energy, your mood, possibly your weight, blood pressure. So it's already, fast enough for us to see some health benefits for sure.
So, Christina Torres, for those folks that maybe like the taste of cocktails or beer and wine, what can they do at home? How can they concoct drinks for themselves that are non-alcoholic and healthy?
Yeah, so we, not only here, but also just like online and at various other stores, we carry spirits that are non-alcoholic that are meant to imitate the taste of alcohol. So they won't always be like 100% like a whiskey, but you'll get pretty close to it. So you can always get like an alternative whiskey or an alternative rum, and you can make your own cocktails at home following the same recipes that you would just like a regular cocktail. But yeah, there's so many options, and it's so interesting to see like how close we've gotten to actually replacing the taste of alcohol.
And Dr. Portman, we only have about 30 seconds left, but I was reading that alcoholism or health problems associated with alcohol are felt more acutely among women. Why is that?
Yeah, there's a couple of different reasons, but the biggest one is, the biggest two are that women tend to be smaller, and women also have less of the enzyme that breaks down alcohol. So for us, kind of common saying is that about 1 drink for a woman is the equivalent of 2 drinks for men. So we do see when women start to drink, especially every day, that they're going to be affected a lot sooner than men in terms of their liver or their brain function, and then all the other things we talked about, the mood, the weight, the high blood pressure. So I think that there's a lot of women who are beginning to notice that alcohol is negatively impacting their health.
All right, Dry January just getting started. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. We appreciate it. Our thanks to Christina Torres and Dr. Elizabeth Portman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And up next, our Spotlight Politics team on a tumultuous 2 days in Congress. But first, we take a look at the weather.
Republicans in the U.S. House failed to elect a speaker again today. And Vice President Kamala Harris visited Chicago today. All that and much more in our Spotlight Politics. The team is back. Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, Paris Schutz. First spotlight of the new year. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
So the vice president was in town to tout the administration's accomplishments. Heather, give us a recap of her day here.
Well, the bipartisan infrastructure bill contains $2 billion to repair bridges across the country. And today, Vice President Harris came to say, you, Chicago, get $144 million of that $2 billion to repair 4 bridges over the Calumet River near the Illinois International Port. Fun fact, the bridge over the 95th Street, which was in the Blues Brothers movie, was the one they jumped. That is also going to be repaired as part of this. She also stopped, of course, at Calumet Fisheries. She got trout, salmon, fried oysters, no shrimp, though.
Natch. Interesting. No shrimp. Okay. I digress. So with the president also on the road today in Kentucky, Paris, is this sort of an official launch or unofficial launch of their re-election bid in 2024?
It seems like it, although it's really early in the cycle since it's the first week of the 2022 term in Congress. So you got 2 years to go. But he was there with the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the Republican, who's been a thorn in the side of Democrats for a long time. And they were kind of praising each other, complimenting each other for this bipartisan infrastructure accomplishment. Contrast that with what was going on in the House, where Kevin McCarthy lost his 5th and 6th votes to be Speaker, and there's just all kinds of disunity and disarray. So much different picture in the Senate. I don't know how that plays into re-election for Biden or for Senate Republicans or House Republicans, but it was an interesting contrast.
Campaigning never, ever, ever
Well,
stops,
and
I think is really part of that lesson. So even if it's not necessarily a kickoff, it is for sure a contrast, intentionally so, and they're never going to stop campaigning.
I think Democrats have acknowledged in the past that they pass big policy initiatives and then they don't sell them, like Obamacare. You know, they pass it and they wash their hands of it, and they let other people define what it was. So I think they're trying to avoid that mistake.
So in D.C., also in the, I think the 2023 session, isn't it? Or Congress, the newest members.
2023. Oh my goodness.
Yes, I know, right?
It's
hard.
so fresh. You're forgetting.
It's all right. It's all right. It's only day 4. So the newest members of the Illinois delegation, they are in limbo with the GOP speaker standoff. Nothing can happen, including being sworn in without the election of a speaker. So take a look at what Republican members against Kevin McCarthy are saying.
If you want to drain the swamp, you cannot put the biggest alligator in charge of the exercise.
For the good of the country, the good of the Congress, and the good of the Republican conference, he ought to pull out.
Bob Good for the good. Amanda, how bad is this for the GOP, or is this democracy at work?
I mean, it's both. I don't think that this particularly inspires a lot of confidence, particularly about what is to come now that Congress will be in Republican control with just the slightest edge of control. What are they going to do if you can't elect a speaker, if you can't agree on that? How are you going to agree on some very controversial policies that are going to be coming their way? So doesn't particularly bode well. This is a little bit like a Groundhog Day at this point, except for far less entertaining and far bigger consequence. I mean, I will say that while I think there is a lot of frustration and disgust, perhaps from some members of the public, certainly within Republicans in Congress, the majority of whom do want McCarthy to be their speaker, for the 20 that are against him, including Illinois' own Mary Miller, this is exactly what they campaigned on. They are getting a lot of attention. They thrive really on this sort of being an obstacle. They want to be a thorn. They will continue to be so. And I want to point out that the GOP nominee for governor here in Illinois, Darren Bailey, has also used his public platform, Twitter. He's no longer going to be a state senator as of next week, but to say that he likewise believes that McCarthy, he didn't use the term alligator, but it says McCarthy is the wrong way and is the wrong person for the job. He is somebody who is perhaps looking to make his next political move running for Congress against Mike Bost, who is already seen as pretty conservative.
Now, so the video that we were just seeing of the House chamber just a minute ago, I saw a kid sitting in the audience. Heather, you know, Congress members' families are waiting to witness that very important moment of them being sworn in, which cannot happen during all of this. Anything that can be done about that?
They can't adopt a rule that would say, go ahead, have the swearing in before you elect a speaker, because they haven't elected the speaker. It's truly Groundhog Day, and it has been 6 votes. It has been 2 days, and there does not yet seem to be a clear path forward, although it has been interesting to watch the male members of Congress have to cope with their tiny humans while sort of dealing with all of these dramas.
Watching actually all of this is interesting, and I read something about how because basically when once a speaker is elected, there's more control over where the cameras go. Whereas now we're seeing all sorts of views, and exactly, you're seeing a whole lot more side conversations, and
you're wondering what's happening in some of those conversations, aren't we? Is there a compromise to be had here, Paris? How could this end?
There's been some interesting scenarios floated, one of them being the former congressman from Michigan, Fred Upton, a moderate Republican who just retired. He's in, I think, our viewing area, Berrien County, Harbor Country up there, saying, hey, I'd be interested in being kind of a moderate. If some of the moderate Republicans wanted to join with all the Democrats, I would put equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans on all these committees. That's pretty tantalizing if you're a Democrat. But given the way things have gone in Washington, really hard to believe that that would happen. There are some reporting, there is some reporting out of Washington that the cracks in the opposition are starting to show here, and McCarthy is just going to outlast everyone probably. And again,
seems to be his plan.
But you know what? It's like, be careful what you wish for. It's the dog that caught up with the car. You are ruling over an unruly caucus, and as you mentioned, Amanda, some of those members have no interest in getting anything done. And Republicans have said this. Some of those members are just there to build their brand, to go on to Twitter and social media to be famous, and then go on conservative media to say, see what I'm doing. And the fame is like the end goal, not getting anything done. And Republicans are frustrated with those members.
Because let's not forget, by the way, that it's not as if McCarthy hasn't been trying to win these votes from members of the Freedom Caucus. Yeah. He has made overtures and concessions, and it has not done the trick.
He went to Mar-a-Lago and kissed the ring a couple weeks after January 6, 2020.
And here he is today, still losing. So moving back to our home state, Illinois lawmakers back to work in Springfield today with supporters of an assault weapon ban at the Capitol. Amanda, could this pass in a lame duck session?
Certainly there is the expectation that it will, and that this is really the grand chance, because a lame duck is just that. It's when you have some members that are lame ducks, they're not going to be coming back, not having to worry about being on the re-election ballot, and so they might be more free to vote for something that is controversial, which this still is. Even if you have polls showing that a majority of Illinois residents support something like this, it is very controversial. I cannot bet and say that this is for certain going to pass in the lame duck session. I will say this, though, that it won't, I don't think, in its current form. There are very much negotiations, talks going on right now about what can be taken in, what can be left out of the current legislation in order to get those additional votes. And so it won't pass, I don't think, as it is right now.
So also the FDA cleared more pharmacies to dispense Plan B abortion pills. Heather, explain the expansion and its future in the courts, please.
Well, this will mean that you can go to a pharmacy, including Walgreens, which said today that they will dispense the abortion pills and basically get it with a doctor's prescription. Before this, you had to go to a clinic and you had to be seen either via telehealth or in person by an abortion provider. So this will ease access in states where abortion is legal. It will not affect states like Texas and Florida, where the right to abortion is significantly curtailed, and many pharmacies in those states may not dispense these pills because of those legal concerns. So this is an action by the FDA under President Joe Biden. He has promised to expand access to abortion, and this is another instance of that. In Illinois, it could help take some of the pressure off the clinics, which have been packed as women travel from other states where abortion has been banned.
Okay, so there are 55 days until Chicago's mayoral election, and there are a flurry of new campaign ads out. Take a look.
Crypto crooks, indicted Pauls, and pay-to-play profiteers. The more you know, the worse it gets.
Crime is out of control, and combative leadership is failing us.
Paul Vallis will put crime and your safety first.
Brandon Johnson has a plan to make Chicago safer, grow Chicago businesses, and create jobs.
All right. So, Heather, does it look like Chuy Garcia and Lori Lightfoot are just going after each other? And, is that the right choice if they're just attacking each other and kind of ignoring everybody else who's in this race?
Well, this was the first negative ad put out by the mayor in her re-election campaign. And it's clear she sees Jesus Chuy Garcia, the current congressman, as her biggest competition, which is why you have her linking him to Michael Madigan and Sam Bankman-Fried and a host of sort of sketchy political, operatives. Yes, sketchy.
Not everybody could see that. We'll do it again when we come back.
You saw two other candidates, Brandon Johnson, Paul Vallis. They both have the money to get up on television and are now up on television, joining Willie Wilson, who's been up on television for months. So the mayor might think this is a two-person race. She might want it to be a two-person race. It is not a two-person race.
This is sketchy, by the way.
For those go back 4 years, you know, Mayor Lightfoot at the time was kind of a relative no-name, and it took a seismic event occurring that boosted her, and that, of course, was the raid, the federal raid of Alderman Ed Burke's office, and subsequent finding out he was under investigation. So she was saying, well, I'm the only one in this race that's not a politician. I'm the one that wants to clean up all the aldermanic privilege and all that stuff, and people like Frank Winkle, Susanna Mendoza were tied to Ed Burke. And so, you know, this was a seismic event that shifted the race. I think for some of the lesser knowns in this race, something like that's going to have to happen, where then they jump onto it, and then their recognition goes to the top. But it's a smart bet to say right now, the ones that have the money, the ones that have the name recognition, are the ones to focus on for now.
January surprise is what we're looking for. Amanda, Alderman Ray Lopez has thrown his support to Willie Wilson. How much is that going to matter?
I can't imagine that that is going to make a huge difference. I think that often endorsements don't, unless, of course, they come, as we've talked about, if they come with money and if they come with foot soldiers. And Ray Lopez does not bring a ton of either of those. He, of course, had wanted to run for mayor himself. It's not a nothing burger, but it is not particularly significant for Willie Wilson's campaign, particularly given that he has his own dough.
Yeah, if only it hurts Paul Vallis, I think, because Paul Vallis was really running to be the consensus, middle-of-the-road, conservative, tough on crime, pro-police candidate. And to have Ray Lopez line up behind Willie Wilson, who is sort of very aligned with those positions, I think will make a lot of people say, maybe Paul Vallis isn't the guy if I'm a conservative voter.
All right, more to come. That's Spotlight. Thanks, Amanda, Heather, and Paris. A boxing gym in the basement of a local church is on a mission to provide new opportunities for neighborhood kids. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez tells us more from Little Village.
It's Friday night and Coach Gabriel Navarro is hosting an amateur boxing tournament. Boxing clubs across the country go head-to-head.
I love seeing the kids win their trophies or their belts, and, you know, I just love the smile on their face.
Navarro is a former professional boxer who is head coach at Chicago Youth Boxing Club.
I like to teach what I've learned. Half of my coaches, they were fighters here first, and now they're coaches.
During the week, the gym is a packed house for practice. Students like Elizabeth Rodriguez come after school.
What I like about being here is that you come here, you have like a family, you support each other when sparring, and you can take out your anger or like just a stress reliever.
Most of the youth participating are from the Little Village neighborhood. 15-year-old Brandon Irales says he's lost 80 pounds since joining the boxing club.
I used to get bullied a lot, and I didn't like that, so I also felt like I couldn't do things that other people could do, so I decided to come back here and lose all the weight.
Navarro says the program focuses on giving kids confidence in and out of the ring.
He will never step in the ring like a year ago.
Really, never?
No, he said he was never going to do it. He's too fat, this and that. I'm like, we could do it. And look at him now.
Chicago Youth Boxing Club started in 2006 as a refuge for young people seeking a positive outlet. Ragula Kala participated in the program when he was a kid and now coaches others.
They give me different outlets because I grew up in the street. I had friends that were in gangs, friends that were doing bad stuff. I had friends that were doing good stuff, so it was up to me to choose, and this boxing really helped me guide myself.
The boxing club is in the basement of La Villita Community Church in Little Village. Noah Pickens is the new executive director and says he has big plans for the boxing center.
We really focus a lot on the boxing, the sport itself, you know, but we also have a piece of our programming that's nutrition and health, right? And then on the third side, it'd be more like academic success and personal growth.
The team says it's getting ready to revamp programming beyond the ring. Mentor Alexis Urube is leading a tutoring program called Si Se Puede.
The vision is essentially to be able to help anyone and everyone in the community, you know, whether that's through academic support, social emotional learning, or just providing a safe space for youth to be able to be there.
And some compete in tournaments like this in hopes to be good enough to go pro.
A lot of them, you know, come in and they're nationally ranked, or they're hoping to get nationally ranked, and all that opens doors for the possibilities of what it is that someone may want to do, whether it's in boxing or in something else.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
The Boxing Center is open Monday through Friday from 3 to 9 p.m. To learn more about the club, head over to our website, WTTW.com/news. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Property tax bills are up by more than 20% for some in Logan Square. How residents there are responding.
And ahead of the Bears season finale, we take a look at the team's biggest needs heading into the offseason. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thanks so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.